Welcome to the Underwater Podcast, where we take a deep dive into the world of underwater portrait photography, cinematography, and everything in between. With me, your host, Brett Stanley. Welcome back to the Underwater Podcast, and this week we're strapping on the rebreather with wildlife cinematographer Jeff Hester. Jeff is responsible for some of the footage seen in shows like Blue Planet, Deadliest Catch, and those amazing Apple TV screensavers. We chat about how he went from a marine biology degree to shooting orcas for Netflix, sitting underwater for 7 hours at a time, and what it's like not seeing the results of your work for years after it was shot. Alright, let's dive in. Jeff, welcome to the Underwater Podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Brett.
Where are you? Are you somewhere cool at the moment? Are you like on a boat out in the middle of the ocean somewhere?
Not at the moment. If you would have contacted me a couple weeks ago, then I could have said yes. But I'm in San Diego right now at home.
Oh, well, that's nice though.
Yeah, it's been good. Summer's been busy, so it's been nice to catch up and have some family time at home.
So you have been working. Have you been out on location filming?
Yeah. So I'm fortunate in that San Diego is an amazing place for underwater work. We have a ton of ocean wildlife. And, once COVID kind of hit, it, wiped out everything that I had planned for this year. But a lot of that work ended up getting filled in because a lot of the companies I work for are out of the UK. And so they can't get out here. So I ended up just taking on a lot of contract work as a company.
Oh, that's great. So a lot of this stuff hasn't stopped happening. I guess these productions are still got to get shooting and they still want to get footage of these animals. So you just got to get out there. Yeah, definitely. And again, just really fortunate that I'm kind of positioned in a place that, has a lot of opportunity for that. There's a couple other people in the industry who are getting to work a lot, but, a lot of those people that are kind of in countries that are more locked down or that are more landlocked there, I know they're really struggling and, having a hard time getting work because, they can't get anywhere. Yeah, exactly. So what is it about San Diego? What makes it such a rich place for marine life?
Yeah, we have a lot of different things. We have a kelp forest ecosystem. We have a lot of upwelling, which is when you bring a lot of nutrient-rich water from down deep and provides a lot of food for everything up the food chain, basically.
Right.
We have tons of whales, dolphins, just, everything comes here to eat.
Wow. And is that where you grew up? Did you just happen to grow up in an awesome place for marine life?
No, not at all.
Damn.
I wish.
Yeah, exactly.
I grew up in Portland, Oregon, actually. So we have a river there, but the ocean's a little bit of a drive.
That's true. Yeah. So tell me your story. So did you come up being interested in marine life and underwater work as a kid? Yeah, definitely. So growing up, a lot of our vacations during the summer were out to the Oregon coast, which is very different than the the Southern California coast. It's a lot colder, so I wasn't getting in the water too much, but just did a lot of tide pooling and just really loved being out in nature. And eventually, pursued a marine science degree in college and ran with it from there. Oh, right. So did the marine science degree, did that get you underwater as well? Did that include getting scuba certified and going out and doing research?
Yeah. So I think it was my sophomore year of college. I had a summer internship with the Scripps Institute. I always mess this one up. The Scripps Institution of Oceanography.
Oh, right. Yeah. That's a mouthful. Yeah.
Yeah. Here in La Jolla. And what I was doing was creating three-dimensional models of a coral that's in the Caribbean so that we could properly measure the surface area without being too invasive. The previous methods were pretty invasive where you either rip the coral out or you were covering it with some things to make molds with. And so we were doing it through photos pretty much. And the grad student that I was working with, she was talking about possibly needing a research assistant later on to go with her to the Caribbean to, help her with some stuff. But at the time I didn't have my scuba certification. And so that was kind of the impetus for that. I'd always wanted to get it. I'd done a lot of free diving and snorkeling, but never really, dove into use a pun there, to full underwater stuff.
So that's interesting. So you were kind of in the beginning of, I guess, is it light field kind of mapping of corals and stuff?
a very rudimentary version of that. So this was in 2000, what was it? 2010. So it was a software program called Photo Modeler. And we had to point by point go through and identify the same spot in all of these photos. And so, you might end up creating 50,000 points, but we did it by hand back then. I'm sure there was a better way. I know there's a better way now, but it was, the summer, I think I got like 15 models done. So they were definitely time consuming.
That's really interesting. And then, so how did you then get into underwater cinematography?
Yeah, so it's funny. I feel like when you talk with anyone that, I'm sure you interview people all the time that are in this industry, that everyone's path is different. It's such an odd way to get to where we are. But for me, it was all from the marine science background initially. So going through college, my direction was kind of to finish up my bachelor's and go into a PhD, and then kind of take the academic route and be like an instructor researcher at a university somewhere in marine science. But there were a few different things that kind of altered my path there. And so one of them was getting scuba certified and getting a lot more dive experience. And then my senior year, I actually did my senior thesis with NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration.
Right.
And I was looking at how heavy metal contaminants affect the health of long-beaked common dolphins in the Southern California Bight. And through that, I actually ended up working for NOAA right out of college, working on marine mammal genetics. And so that kind of threw the first wrench in my career trajectory of going the PhD right after my bachelor's route.
Right. Yeah. Derailed you a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. But I'm so grateful for it, honestly.
Yeah.
Not that there's anything wrong with going the PhD route, but I'm pretty happy with what I do now.
And that's the thing. So, at the moment you're probably doing a lot more diving. You're probably interacting with a lot of animals more because of the cinematography than the PhD side of things.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the shoot that I just finished up about 2 weeks ago, I think it was a 10-day shoot, and we spent about 70 hours underwater. So we were doing about 7 hours a day, which was crazy. It's just, we do like 7-hour stretches basically on rebreathers, waiting for this fish called a sarcastic fringe head to do the behavior that we were trying to capture. It's very weird.
That's incredible. So, aside from the fact that the fish is called a sarcastic fringe head, which makes me want to know what kind of behavior it actually exhibits. But you're down there for 7 hours. Is that like at a stretch, like in one go?
Yes. Sometimes it's at one go. Sometimes we'll break it up and do like a 4-hour stretch and a 3-hour stretch, or we're doing a lot of like underwater tripod and Dana dolly kind of stuff. So sometimes too, you take 2-3 hours to set everything up, and then pop back onto the boat and maybe grab a bite to eat, and then get back in for a 4 or 5 hour stretch to film.
Right. I think for me, like I'm only just starting to learn how a lot of this footage is taken. Like, I love the Blue Planet, I love the BBC series and all that sort of stuff. And I didn't start to think about how this footage was captured. I was just so enraptured by how amazing it was. But then thinking that it's a wildlife shoot, so it's pretty similar to probably shooting wildlife on land, where you got to sit in a hide for hours and wait for the thing to happen. Is it similar underwater in terms of having to stake out a certain area or stake out an animal?
Yeah, I'd say it's very similar. It's only been recently that we've not had as much of the limitations of the scuba equipment. So prior to rebreathers becoming as well, some would say they're still not that safe, but there's a lot of redundancy now that they didn't have before. So they're a lot safer than they previously were. But yeah, if I was on open circuit scuba, my dive times would probably just be 45 minutes to an hour at a time, and then I have to go up to the boat, switch tanks, come back down. Not only that, you're blowing a lot of bubbles with the rebreather. It's all closed. You're very non-invasive to the environment, so that animals can get really used to you quickly and will just be comfortable and do the behaviors. So for a lot of that benthic work, it is very similar to topside wildlife, where you sit in a hide and you're waiting for the for the thing to happen. But then we also do a lot of pelagic work or open ocean work, where you're just on the ocean searching for hours and hours and hours. And like I did a shoot last year in Monterey, filming killer whales going after gray whale calves.
Oh, wow.
And so that for that, I mean, I think we spent 10 days on the water, probably about 10 to 12 hours a day searching before we even saw an orca. And so that also can get like pretty draining. I mean, you're just constantly on the lookout. And the thing with these wildlife shows too is the interaction or the behavior can happen in an instant, and you have to be ready. So you might have had, hours and hours and hours of searching and nothing, and you start to get tired, but really you need to just be on all the time, because if that thing happens and it's only going to happen for 5 minutes and you miss it, then it's not going to work.
Yeah, exactly. And all that work would have been for nothing.
Exactly.
So when you're saying you're searching, are you in the water, physically in the water, or are you on the water in boats searching for the action, and then you're sort of rolling in and getting the footage, or are you underwater the whole time kind of finding stuff?
Yeah, so I'm on boats for most of it when you're trying to look around. Yeah. If it's something something we're setting up on the seafloor, then yeah, we're in the water the whole time.
Yeah. So, I mean, you do aerial footage as well. When you're out on the boats, are you sending up the drones to kind of try and find where to go?
Yeah. Sometimes we do that. And I mean, the drone technology, it's crazy how far it's come in just a short period of time. And it's become, I mean, it's on every wildlife shoot we go on now. And it's almost a must have, not only for the filming aspect, but exactly like what you just said, to do a search. I can run, a lot of times we'll take a Phantom 4 or a Mavic or something like that, and run a 2-mile stretch as we kind of putt with the boat to look for the animals, and a lot of times it sees, the drone sees the animals before we do, so it's become really helpful. Or even a lot of times too, we'll use it as a marker. So like if we're like, there was a shoot we did with tiger sharks, and it's so easy to get someone to throw up a drone and stick it right over the shark, so you know exactly where it is in relation to where you are.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
And if there's multiple, or
yeah. I mean, that must have made the job so much easier, I guess, being able to see from above what's happening and know, oh, they're going in that direction, or they're about to split up, or all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, there was a shoot we did last year that we could not find. We were looking for cow nose rays in La Paz, and they like these big aggregations of them, and we were completely useless on the boat. I mean, there's so much glare, and even if they're just 5 feet under the surface, we had to be 10 feet away from them to find them. So you're finding a needle in a haystack basically, and then you throw the drone up, and you're like, oh, they're right there. They're 100 yards off, our port corridor or whatever.
Oh, absolutely. I was in La Paz last year, and we went, swimming with the whale sharks.
Oh, nice.
But they were in the harbor there, and the water was so murky that they were right next to us, like 6 inches under the water, and I couldn't even see them.
Yeah.
It was just the fact that our spotter, who's standing up on the on the bow of the ship, of the little boat, who could, he had enough angle to see, oh, there it is, But for us sitting in the boat, it was like it was like they weren't even there.
What are you talking about?
Yeah, exactly. It was incredible. But in saying that, you must have to work in some pretty horrible kind of clarity, like the environments you work in. I guess you don't really have a choice. If the animal's there, you've got to jump in and get the footage, right?
Yeah, pretty much. I think one of the benefits, so most of the work that I do now is like blue chip wildlife, what they call anything with planet in the title, basically. Blue planet, planet Earth, our planet, those types of things.
Is that what they call blue chip? Is that, because I've heard that term before and I just really haven't understood what that meant.
Yeah. So that's the what they call blue chip wildlife, or blue chip natural history.
Top tier, big budget stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so we often have the luxury where we do have the budget that if the visibility isn't great, we'll still get in and we'll still try to shoot, but we typically have a good amount of time to spend there, so that, if the visibility isn't good this week, that hopefully next week it's going to clear up and we're going to get the shots that will make the show. But yeah, definitely we do dive in some pretty awful conditions, and you just hope that you're going to get better conditions for what's actually going to make it on TV.
Yeah. And what about weather-wise? I mean, you're at the mercy of the weather. That must affect you quite a lot as well.
Yeah, definitely. I think one of my mentors, who's a producer over in the UK, was kind of saying that I think he breaks it down into like thirds. Like a third of the time when you're on the ocean, you're not going to be able to work because of weather. Like a third of the time you will be able to work because of weather, but the animals won't be there. And then a third of the time you'll have the weather and the animals, just kind of as a rough estimate.
Right. Yeah. It's like that Venn diagram where you got the three circles. Yeah. You can have good weather and animals and no access or yeah.
Exactly.
So I guess you're kind of fighting against that all the time, trying to get that perfect condition.
Yep. Yeah, exactly.
So speaking of that sort of stuff, and we all love the horror stories. What are the worst conditions? Like, what are the worst kind of places you've had to go?
Oh man, the worst places.
you're probably deep down in the memory banks now. You've probably hidden them.
Yeah, exactly. Repressed all of those memories, shoved them way down. Let's see.
Do you have jobs that you couldn't get the shot, or the shot was so close, but then something happened to kind of stop that shot happening?
Yeah, a little bit. Usually we are able to pivot. So that's the other thing with a lot of these programs is, since we do have the time, and if we get there and things aren't exactly like what we thought they were going to be, we can pivot and tell a little bit of a different story, or we'll capture other things so that if the thing that we're trying to get doesn't work out because of conditions or the animal's not showing up or whatever, that we can still deliver something. Yeah, so I've been fortunate that I haven't had too many strikeouts. I think we've always been able to deliver.
Wow.
Yeah, we've definitely had some tough shoots. We had one last fall. It was a 5-week shoot, and it was just that's the other thing with the ocean and the times right now is every year is so different. What you used to be able to count on from historical data, you just really can't anymore. Year to year, it's like the ocean might be 10 degrees warmer next year, and that animal's not going to be there, or the kelp's not going to be there because it died off because the ocean was warmer.
Yeah. So like migratory patterns are changing, and they're not as reliable as they used to be, or as you say, like the temperature of the water goes up a couple of degrees and that kelp forest disappears.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, our kelp forest got hit pretty hard. We had a big El Nino in 2014, I think it was, and it was just getting back to being recovered. But yeah, there was a good stretch in there where it was tough to find a healthy kelp forest,
which is such a shame, because the kelp forest is such an amazing place to be underwater. I come from Australia, and it's not something that I've ever seen before. And then diving out of Southern California here and having someone take me into this underwater forest of kelp was incredible.
Oh yeah, it's like my favorite ecosystem to dive in. That's another great benefit of San Diego is our kelp forests are pretty amazing. Like San Clemente Island, that's about 60-ish miles offshore of San Diego. You can get 100-foot visibility in the kelp forest on the southern end of the island. It's just incredible.
Yeah, I mean, those kelp forests are just incredible. And I think one of the things that I love at the moment are the Apple screensavers, the Apple TV screensavers, and where they've got those really slow underwater amazing footage of the kelp forest, and they've got like seals and dolphins and stuff. You worked on some of that, right?
Yeah. And it was a really incredible project to work on. It was really different too than my normal type of like sequence work, in that our deliverable when we were on locations, you basically have to shoot like. You're just trying to get one shot perfect, basically. A lot of the sequence work, like I was saying before, if you get there and it's not like what you think it will be, you can pivot, or you can get away with a couple 2-second cutaways that might not be the best, but you can kind of hide them in the story. But everything on these screensavers just had to be perfect.
Well, because they've got such an aesthetic between the above water ones and the aerial ones and the space ones, that is just one single shot that basically keeps pushing forward very, very steadily. So I guess you've got to get this amount of footage and kind of have composed this perfectly that you can just push forward and just have the story keep being told. Yeah,
definitely. So that was, going into it, I thought it would be something so simple. You're just trying to get one shot. It makes it sound so easy, but yeah, in reality, the shots are trying to run between 2 minutes at a minimum, but really the closer we could get to 10 minutes, the better. Right. So yeah, you're trying to you're fighting surge, or you're fighting all types of things that you just basically end up doing the same thing over and over and over and over again.
Have you got the ability to move the camera at all, or do you have to basically keep the line you were on?
Mostly the line you're on. There were opportunities for small corrections, but the idea was to really not feel the hand of the cameraman.
Yeah. So if you're filming something, so say if you're chasing some dolphins or something, and they decide to start, jump out of frame and start doing some awesome stuff out to the left of frame, you're kind of dying inside, right?
Yes. Yeah, very, very much so. Yeah. So that shot becomes pretty much useless. And then we'll try to reframe or try to get them back on track.
Yeah. So do you know which ones of those screensavers you did? I know you did the dolphins.
Yeah, so I worked on the La Paz, the cow-nose rays, the jellies in Alaska that are the moon jellies, and then the dolphins there, the common dolphins.
Right. It's just incredible. What were you shooting those on? It just seems so crystal clear and so much definition in those shots.
Yeah, so it was, those were pretty much all shot on either the red Epic Dragon or the Helium.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So good dynamic range and what sort of frame rate were you on?
So when we were on the Helium, we used that a lot less because we were limited. You didn't want to crop in too much on the sensor because we start to get image degradation and all that. So the max we were going on those was about 75 frames. So we used the Epic Dragon mostly, and that was anywhere between like 95 frame to 110 or so.
Oh, right. That's beautiful.
Yeah.
And were you powered at all through some of those shots, or was it just you just finning yourself through the shot?
Yeah, so it'd either be finning or like a pole cam, like attached to a boat.
Right. Yeah, because with the dolphins and stuff, I'm assuming you're not really keeping up with those guys.
No, I've tried my best before, and it's embarrassing.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, they take pity on you. So you've done stuff for really top-notch productions like the Our Planet, the Blue Planet, and the Apple screensavers. But you've done work on more narrative things like The Deadliest Catch as well, right?
Yeah.
So what was it like when you were working on a show like Deadliest Catch, where you've got less time to get things done?
So it was interesting. So I was a field producer and a shooter on it. So I was on the boat, the Saga, with Jake Anderson, and I was the guy that runs around on the deck filming all the deckhands as they're fishing. And it's interesting because we were out there for I think about 10 weeks total. Coming back into port to deliver the crab and then going back out. But I found that I felt like we had a ton of time. I felt like they call it, when we first got there, they went through the whole, style of how the show goes and how they want you to run it and how they want you to, produce everything on the boat. And they called it shooting the seagulls, where you basically are like, I don't know what to do, but I have time. So I'm going to start filming seagulls, and they're like, don't do that. We have enough seagull footage.
Yeah, that's right. We don't need
100 hours of it.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, that's the thing with a show like that. I mean, it's all in the editing, right? Because it seems like it's hectic. It seems like something's happening all the time. But I guess if you've got 10 weeks of footage, there's probably a lot of downtime. Like you say, like shooting seagulls.
Yeah. Well, and that's the interesting thing. And that's what I really learned from working on that show was, more of the story aspect of it, because exactly what you said, it's not scripted. You don't necessarily have the time when something happens. You have a ton of time outside of when something happens. But, a lot of it was kind of seeing, okay, where's a story beat, and, locking in on it so that you make sure that you cover, a beginning, a middle, and an end, so that you can tell, a little sequence within the show.
I mean, that's the sort of thing that's really important for the stuff that you do, right? Especially because I guess once you're out filming, especially the wildlife stuff, you're underwater, you've got to make the calls, I guess, on what you film and how it fits the story. Is the story, say something like The Blue Planet or something like that, are you given kind of a narrative to kind of chase, or is the narrative created from your footage?
Yeah, we're definitely given a storyboard at the beginning. We just did this shoot on giant black sea bass, which is this really big fish that was almost fished to the point of extinction. but it was all done at Catalina Island. And so we basically went into the shoot knowing that, okay, we want to capture these behaviors, and we're telling this story that this fish is coming kind of back from the dead almost, starting to recover. And a lot of that is, it's for a show about courtship and mating. And so, we kind of go into it and know the general idea of where we want to go. And a lot of that too comes from scientists. We work with a lot of collaborators who, through their research, we're able to chat with them, and they can kind of tell us a bit of, the behavior, or, a bit of the recovery aspect. And so, we're trying to follow those storylines. And then, but once you get there and you kind of see for yourself, it's very different when a scientist does something, and then when you get there and experience it for yourself. And so then we kind of run with it from there. If it can take off on a different angle, or, if the initial storyline was great, then we just keep going with that.
And are you so when you're down there, I'm assuming there's a team of you, and not very often you're down there by yourself. Are you on comms? Are you discussing with the surface, or have you got a producer, or are you the producer making the calls on, oh, maybe we should pivot this direction?
Yeah, it really depends on the shoot. So most of the time there's just two of us down there. So I'll have, myself on camera, and then have a safety diver and assistant who's with me. And, sometimes we're on comms with each other, especially if it's a really, technical thing that we're trying to accomplish, or if it's, setting up gear, then it's just a lot easier to chat with each other than try to do the sign language. And then, sometimes we'll have someone up top on the boat that we have comms with, but most of the time that's not really for the story or the narrative. It's mostly for safety, pretty much.
Right. Yeah, just to check in and make sure everything's still okay on the surface, and that you guys are doing okay down there.
Exactly.
Yeah. So you're dealing with, information from scientists and from marine biologists. Do you have times where they're like, oh, there's this animal, and we think it does this. We've seen it a couple of times, but we're not sure if it's a real thing that it does. And then you go out and film it, and you're like, oh my God, it totally is a thing that it does. Are you confirming things out there?
Yeah, definitely. And I think, not only that, but we are also getting to experience things that scientists aren't necessarily aware of. And so it almost is a bit of a two-way street, where we just did this shoot in Hawaii on humpbacks in February, March, right before COVID hit, or how you put that. But we found new behaviors that scientists studying there had never seen before, because we have the opportunity to spend a lot of time with the animals, and a lot of times scientists are restricted by budgets, or by, things that the university or the institution they're working with, might not allow them to do. They might not allow them to dive at night, and so you miss behaviors at night, or might not allow them to dive on rebreathers, and so they can't get the intimate interactions that we can.
Yeah. So you're basically, they're giving you the information to go and find these things, and then you're giving them back some amazing footage so they can confirm their kind of hypothesis. That's incredible. And it's such a beautiful kind of, as you say, two-way street. And then the people at home like myself who just get to enjoy these things just take it all for granted.
Yeah. I was going to say too, on that note, if it's okay to run with it, I don't think I completely answered your question earlier about the jump from marine science to camera work. And this might be a decent segue into that, because I originally got into camera work because I wanted to be able to communicate the science that I was doing, or that other researchers were doing, with the general public, because I feel like there's a lot of breakdown right there, where I don't think scientists are often too well versed at communicating what their research is, and they can have the most groundbreaking research in the world, but if you can't communicate it to the public, then it's kind of it's lost.
Yeah. And so you found by filming this stuff and by getting decent footage of it, that was communicating it to the public a bit better?
Yeah, exactly. Or creating these little videos, or now with the blue chip wildlife stuff, hits a bigger audience, and we are able to tell little scientific bits in it.
Yeah. So I see what you mean. So you're saying that you can package this footage into something that the general public is going to sort of take more notice of, and create more of an awareness around these things.
Yeah, exactly. And kind of and package it in a way that's a bit more digestible than maybe a scientific paper is.
Yeah. And I think that's the beauty of a lot of these shows, and I'm seeing more and more of them coming out because Netflix is doing shows, and I think they're creating an awareness of these issues whilst packaging them up into some nice and fluffy little, kind of beautiful documentary. But it's also some kind of horrifying changes are happening out there in our oceans.
Yeah, definitely. And I think we're starting to pivot more as an industry into recognizing those and to communicating those. So I think a lot, prior was just, documenting the most beautiful, most incredible aspects of the ocean, when in reality there are a lot of issues that we're facing. And so it almost feels like a responsibility to tell those stories, to tell about or to tell people about the plastic pollution or the overfishing or ocean acidification. I think there is hope, and those stories can often feel a bit hopeless, but I think they're also very important to tell because if you don't know what you're doing wrong, there's no opportunity to change.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, you guys are out there, and as you say, you've got the budget to spend time in these areas. And if it's an area that you've gone to, every year for the last 3 years, and you've noticed a change in that one area over those 3 years, like you can really report back and kind of give data on those kind of areas.
Yeah, definitely. And that's another interesting aspect. And it's a term called shifting baselines, where we see the world now, or for me, I see the ocean now, and if I didn't have any input, or going back to it the same place year after year, I might think that this is normal. And that's where I think it's really important with what we're documenting, that years down the road we're going to be able to look back on it and say, this wasn't normal, look what it used to be. Or that's where I really enjoy. I've got some older mentors. There's one guy, there's a cameraman, underwater cameraman in San Diego here, who's 70, and he's been diving he's dove all over the world for the past 45, 50 years.
Yeah.
And he can tell stories about what used to be here, what used to even just be off of San Diego. And for me, I would never have any idea that those things were there without his input and knowledge.
No, exactly. I think it's that collective memory that is going to help us identify these problems, because without some footage of it, or even just looking at old photos of places, you don't get an idea of how much has changed, because in a lot of cases it happens so slowly that you don't really notice. But it's not until you see a snapshot from 3 years ago that you go, oh wow, that's radically different. In that kind of vein, are you spending a lot of time on each project? Like, have you got projects where you're filming certain animals or certain behaviors for a production over years, or are they shorter sort of time frames?
Yeah, it depends on the production. There's most of the larger productions we take about 3 to 4 years to film.
Oh.
And so, yeah, some of them will go back, 2-3 times to film in the spot, or to get the different behavior. Or sometimes we might have just a year-long production where you gotta get the seasonality right of the animal and the behavior, and then go and make sure you nail it.
Yeah. And are those, and not to kind of pull back the curtain on the Hollywood magic too much, but if we're watching a sequence of an animal and the behavior in something like Blue Planet, is it possible that footage used for that interaction is from different years?
Yeah, potentially.
Wow. So that's great. So you can, if you're missing something from the story, you can go back and kind of do a pickup of it.
Yep. Yeah, 100%.
Wow. So do you get, every time you're going back, are you given it like a shopping list of the shots that they're after? We kind of need these pickups for the previous thing, but if you happen to get some new stuff, then that's a bonus.
Yeah, exactly. That's pretty much how it works. A lot of times they'll, within 6 to 9 months of coming back from a shoot, they'll do a pre-edit and see kind of where the sequence is at, and the holes that we're missing. And then, the next year we can go back and fill those holes and elevate also the different spots that might be a little bit weaker.
Right. How is that for you as a creative though? Like, so having these projects that might not come out for 3 to 4 years after you've filmed it.
Yeah, it's tough at times. I think, especially for me, so I started in 2014, so I'm fairly new to the industry, and especially being a younger cameraman when, I'm trying to prove myself basically, and I can't show anything for 4 years of what my work is. It's like I mentioned to you, I'm pretty much unsearchable on the internet.
Yeah, exactly.
But a lot of the times it's because a lot of the stuff it's under NDA or under wraps. But yeah, starting next year, a lot more of the stuff will start rolling out, so I'll be able to share a bit more. But yeah, these first few years starting out, it's been I would say it's rough, but yeah, it makes it a little bit tougher to get clients that don't know you, but that's all been fine.
So what do you do? How do you get around that? Are you able to do like a bit of a sizzle reel of your own work to send them? Or how do you get work? How do you get started in an industry that you don't have things to show for?
Yeah, so it's such a, I mean, I think I don't really know much outside of the wildlife industry, but I imagine it's probably fairly similar in that most of these industries are pretty small. And so once you kind of get one good job and you did well, then it's a word of mouth basically from there. Right. So that's pretty much every job that I get now. Every contract I get now is all word of mouth or someone that I've worked with previously that thought I did well and wants to hire me again.
So who does hire you? What is the kind of hiring chain? Are you getting? I'm assuming you're not getting hired by Netflix itself. Like you're probably getting hired by a producer.
Yeah, so I'm typically hired by a producer. So for like Netflix, their wildlife arm right now is it's called Wild Space Productions. And that's a company in the UK that was some former BBC executives started that. And yeah, so they've got a few shows that they're working on. And so then I would get hired by Wild Space or BBC is usually pretty direct because they're their own channel as well. But yeah, mostly it's through this like kind of second tier production company or not second tier, that's not the proper term, but it's a contracted production company.
Right. Yeah. Like a third party or something.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And so what was your path into it? Because did you end up having to like assist to start with, or were you safety to start with? Or did you come in straight away as a camera operator?
Yeah. So kind of, going back to my journey, I guess. So I was working at NOAA and realized that I don't really want to spend a ton of my time in the lab and inside. I'd rather be outdoors. There's kind of this misconception that when you become a marine scientist, you're going to spend all of your time out on boats and playing with ocean animals. Yeah. It's not quite accurate. And so I kind of started looking for different opportunities and I had this fellowship that's also a mouthful. It's from an organization called the Our World Underwater Scholarship Society. And It's in partnership with Rolex. And it's the longest running partnership that Rolex has with an organization. I think Pete Romano, you've had on here before. He was involved with the organization like back in the 70s or something. And so,
okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I actually got to go on set with him during the year, and he kind of like showed me around the tank, and they're working on Captain America 2 at that point. And so it was cool to see that side of the industry. But yeah, so through that scholarship or the fellowship, you basically spend a year. It's pretty tailored to what you want to do. And what I wanted to do was, underwater filmmaking or photography. And so I spent, a lot of time traveling around and learning from different people. They also sponsor you with camera equipment. And so I was able to document a bunch of the things that I was doing. I was getting to go places that, most people might not get to go. Like I think I visited all 7 continents that year and got to go to Antarctica with National Geographic. And so it was all pretty exciting and
pretty incredible.
Yeah. So I came out of that year and was kind of like, okay, I want to pursue this full time. Let's see if I can make this happen. And right after that, I started working on a show called The Hunt, which you can find on Netflix right now. But my first roles were as an assistant cameraman and a safety diver. And so I spent, a few years assisting different camera people that were already in the industry, and just learning as much as I could from them, and then slowly started rolling into shooting myself.
Oh, nice. So you kind of so you went into the narrative world and then sort of came back out into the wildlife world.
Yeah, exactly.
That's great. That's a good pivot. It's a good way to get the experience and then come back to the thing that you particularly wanted to do.
Yeah. No, it was really great. And I think too, like, I really enjoyed the things that, the crossover that there is, or, you learn things in a different type of, industry that you can then bring to your craft in wildlife. And, I especially enjoy those types of things.
So that's really interesting. So when you're doing stuff on set, or if you're in sort of more produced stuff with lighting and all that sort of stuff, are you taking lighting setups when you're going and shooting wildlife stuff, or is it mostly natural light?
Yeah, majority of it actually is natural light, but we do take lighting setups with us when the subject calls for it. Anything that's small enough that you can kind of control the lighting. If it's a large animal, then it gets way too difficult. But any type of benthic work, stuff that we're on the seafloor, and it might be shooting little nudibranchs or other little fish, then we'll create these different lighting setups for it.
What do those setups look like? Are they all on the housing like you would with a normal scuba setup, or are you setting up lights on stands around the area?
Yes, pretty much just on stands around the area and setting up the lighting based on that. A lot of we pretty much never shoot with lights on the camera, just because it typically washes out the subject. It makes it look, I don't know, just gives it I don't know what the look is, what the right term is, but
it looks a little fake. It
exactly.
It's the wrong angle. It's so close to the lens.
So harsh
there's no shadowing.
Yeah, exactly. So most of the time we're either trying to, recreate the sun, where we might go overhead or come in with some side lighting. Occasionally we'll do some backlighting for, more creative look on it, because it's pretty unnatural, but yeah.
No, that's great. And do you enjoy that creative side of it?
I really do. Yeah. It opens up so many possibilities. And, when you really nail the lighting, it's really rewarding. I would say I don't enjoy the amount of extra effort it takes, because usually we have, a ton of gear when you bring lighting setups with it. And so we'll often have, it'll be hours and hours of trying to set everything up, where we have these lift bags they're basically, inflatable things that we carry the equipment around with. And, sometimes when we have a lighting setup, we might have, 6 different lift bags that we have to take the lighting equipment, the stands, everything out. It just makes the whole setup take a lot longer, but it is really rewarding in the end to see the final product.
Yeah, especially if you've set up all that lighting and then the animals moved.
Yeah, exactly. That's never good.
No. So recently we had Casey Sapp on here as well, who runs a company that does underwater VR and 360 work. He mentioned that you've worked with him on some of their productions.
So yeah, I've worked with Casey on a few productions now. One of the ones we worked on was a production called Swimming with Humpbacks that we went out to Tonga with. And so yeah, Casey makes these bespoke camera systems. And so the one we took out there was this 3D 360 rig. And that was honestly probably one of the most challenging shoots of my career, because you have these it's a massive rig, because I think it had 13 Blackmagic cameras inside of it in order to capture the resolution and the 3D aspect of it. And in Tonga, they don't allow you to be on scuba of any sort. So you have to free dive everything. And so, it was so tiring. You're just kind of driving around, finding humpbacks, trying to get in the right position. And then I would drop in the water, camera would be dropped in after me, and I'd have to swim as fast as I possibly could, and then hold my breath for as long as I could, while trying to get the shot. It was definitely challenging.
And how aerodynamic is that housing?
It's good, but the issue, so it's on this, it extends about 6-7 feet out in front of you. And so you almost have this pivot point with the control housing that you have to really think through what you're going to do before you do it. Because if I move that housing, even just an inch up, the end of it where the cameras are going to swing down, and all of a sudden all of that water is going to be pushing on the top of the housing, and it's going to want to dive as fast as it possibly can.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So you just have to really think through exactly what you want to do before you do it, which is tough when you have a wild animal that is not going to, perform for you.
Yeah. And it's like driving a Mack truck in reverse through the water.
Yeah, pretty much.
It's going to jackknife yourself.
Yeah.
That must have been crazy. I mean, I spoke to him about those cameras, about those housings, but what was it like to operate the cameras themselves? Like, it sounds interesting pushing the camera through, but what sort of controls do you have over the camera? Is it just like start and stop?
Yeah, so you have most of the controls. A lot of times we would set white balance, and they're all in sync. So when you change the settings on one, it changes all of them. So you'd have, white balance control, ISO. Aperture was all set on the lenses, so we didn't have control over that. We had shutter control, and so and then a record, of course. But yeah, I mean, it was a cool challenge. It is an interesting challenge with these 360 rigs because prior I would set up my shot for where I wanted the lighting, and in 360 it's don't everywhere. Have that. It's everywhere, exactly. So I think some of the first shots that I took, I really didn't take that into account, and because on the control panel, you see what one of the cameras is seeing. You don't get to see what all of them are seeing. You can scroll through and see what they're all seeing, but
right.
You typically just have one, which is the one pointing straight out ahead, because that was kind of the focus point. But yeah, a few of those shots I exposed for the front camera. The sun was behind me, and then when you looked at the the rushes at the end of the day, those cameras that were behind were just completely blown out because it was all sun. And
right.
Yeah, so you almost have to either make adjustments to some of those cameras, prior, where they might be stopped down a little bit more than the other cameras, or you just have to, you're probably going to underexpose, what's on the other side of that.
Right. So you kind of got to average it out, kind of hedge your bets and hope that it all works.
Yeah, exactly.
Was it interesting knowing that you're in camera as well, like that you're being filmed at the same time?
Yeah, that was. So the narrative changed a little bit. For that shoot in particular, they ended up having me as this like marine scientist character that was going out to try to find humpbacks and learn more about them. And initially the storyline wasn't quite like that. So I didn't think I was going to be on camera at all because the final way that they're played is in this seat. So you can go to these different VR centers around the world, and you sit in this chair basically that has, I think they're called positron chairs, where they move around in reaction to what the camera is doing. And so they're pretty much just like 180. So you're mostly only seeing what's forward because you're not really looking behind you. But then for this story, they ended up using that 180 as like the back half that was looking at me for some of the aspects, which was, it was kind of funny. I'm just glad I didn't look like too much of a goober most of the time.
I was going to say, because if you didn't know ahead of time, you might have been, I wish I didn't pull that face the whole time. Or,
yeah.
I had boogers hanging out of my mask the whole time,
Yeah, exactly. Just snot everywhere.
Yeah. What have you got coming up? Have you got, you've just come back from projects. Have you got stuff coming up that's booked in that you can talk about?
So it's an amazing time to be in the industry. I mean, there's so many, and for me, I think it was all serendipitous. I think regardless of whether it was a great time to be in it or not, I think I would be doing this just because I love doing it.
Yeah.
But yeah, with all the streaming platforms, they all want content, and so it's kind of this mad grab right now to get as many things commissioned and as many programs out as they can. So I think currently I have like 7 different active projects, 3 of which I'm a director of photography on. But yeah, I think, let's see, which ones can I talk about? It's also been really interesting, this shift with COVID in the business model even. Previously I might have been hired, or I still am hired as an independent contractor. With this shift with COVID, I can now get hired and contracted as a business, to where, a company hires me to take on a sequence basically, and I give them a budget, and then go from there.
Right.
But the really nice thing about that is that I can kind of do it on my own schedule, as long as there's no seasonality to the animal or the behavior. So I've got like 3 or 4 projects like that running through the end of this year. And so kind of just chipping away at those.
I mean, it must be such an interesting time right now because, we've got so many people at home wanting to watch content, but at the same time, it's really hard for productions to get up and running because there's crew and there's, infection involved and all that sort of stuff. It feels like wildlife, because it's such a small crew, would be really like a kind of a sure bet right now.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, I had a few shoots that have gone down because of COVID related things, but that's where taking on this role as, a contracted company, that means that now I assume a lot of that risk, which honestly, I'm a bit more comfortable doing because I'm here on the ground, with the team. I can see why a company in the UK isn't going to want to, send a team out when they don't really understand the situation or have control over the situation. But for me, it's like, it is a small team. There's typically 4 of us or so. And so, we're able to travel in kind of a small pack and stay pretty much almost quarantined together while we do these shoots.
Yeah, that must be really attractive to, like you say, like people at the BBC, where they can go, you guys just deal with it and get us the footage we need. And then you've got the crew and what their status is like in terms of infection or in terms of testing and all that sort of stuff. So you have a really good handle on it. I think it feels like it's the way forward for a lot of this stuff.
Yeah, I really think so too. And especially thinking about just even capturing new wildlife behavior. Kind of like what I mentioned before, every year is so different. And you can't really, say you want to go film blue whales. Previously it'd be like, okay, we're going to go film July 10th to August 2nd. And you probably have a pretty good chance of making it happen.
Yeah.
Now with the way things are changing, you're not having that, that reliability. And so also, contracting it as a company, I can now be reactive. If it's obviously, a shoot that's local to me, I can be reactive to when those blue whales are around. So maybe, it wasn't July to August this year, but, it was in September. If you would have come out July to August, you'd have gotten nothing for your shoot. But now I can go and make sure that the company, gets some success out of it.
Are you going and shooting your own projects as well? Are you shooting stock footage? Are you shooting things that you can then sell on to someone else?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I shoot quite a bit of stock footage. Yes, a lot of the times something pops up for a day and then it's gone. And so if I can get out onto it, then that's great. And it's footage that people will want.
And how much of your business is that stuff? I mean, the stock footage is probably, it's something you can sell on repeatedly, I guess, once licenses kind of expire and stuff. Is it a large part of your business?
Not so much at this point, and I've kind of been trying to focus on that a bit more this year because, pros and cons, of course, but previously all my stuff was contracted, and so I couldn't, none of that footage is owned by me, and so, I didn't have a ton of stock footage, but, starting this year, I've been, focusing on that a bit more. But yeah, I'd say at this point, it's maybe, it's only about 10% or so of my business.
Right. But that's probably something you want to kind of ramp up a bit more.
Exactly. Yeah. And even getting creative with, working out deals with companies where I might charge a little bit less if I can keep my outs. So anything that they don't use in the show so that I can use it for stock footage down the road. Just, having a little bit more, future thinking in my business.
Yeah, I mean, that stuff's perfect because you might be out on a shoot for like you say, like for grey whales, and you've shot all the footage you need for that. But then like a pod of manta rays come past, and if you happen to be there and shoot that, if you're a contractor, you can't use that footage, right? Because you're work for hire.
Exactly. Yeah. Yep. I pretty much just hand off everything to the company and they deal with it.
Yeah. So yeah, and diversifying and kind of and splitting your business up, I think, is a really good kind of future-proofing kind of way of doing stuff.
Yeah. It's been good, and also and really trying to diversify my skill set in this time too, because I recognize that there are a lot of there's a lot of opportunity out there right now, and really trying to focus on shoots where I might not have gotten the opportunity to do that thing before, like working a shot over or a Cineflex or a GSS, because I, previously didn't have any experience in it. But, at this time right now, I might be the only one that can go and do it.
Yeah.
And so, really trying to diversify skill set. So, if the industry does come to, or if it slows in pace, that I'll have these, skills for later use that I can be hired with.
Yeah, exactly. And are there people in the industry or in just in this whole wildlife world that inspire you? Are there people that you kind of look up to and kind of get inspired by their work?
Yeah, definitely. There are a couple guys that I actually assisted for a bit. One of them is this guy named Doug Anderson. He's been shooting underwater wildlife for, I think, about 25 years. Nice. So he did a lot of the original, Blue Planet, Frozen Planet. He worked on a lot of that stuff. And I really appreciate that he takes a lot of the things that are happening, topside or in studios or things like that, and applies them to underwater. I think we don't do that enough. This classical look underwater is you stick it on a tripod and you have this locked off shot. Yeah. And I think Doug is really pushing the boundaries of, making these things really dynamic and, constantly, keeping pace to the shots. And yeah, I'm just really impressed with his work.
Yeah, that's great. And so he's kind of putting a bit more dynamic movements in there to kind of give you less of a sense of a cameraman.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, a lot of these things that I feel like Hollywood has been doing, or for ages, that underwater is just, it's just a lot tougher too, because we're working in a hostile environment.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think we're a bit behind in that.
Yeah. It is hard. And as you say, like it's all down to so many factors all coming together at once to make that perfect shot. But when it happens, that must be like a screaming underwater sort of situation.
Yes, definitely. I've had a lot of those moments when the patience finally pays off.
Exactly. Jeff, it's been awesome having you on the show, man. It's been so educational and stuff that I'd never even really thought of. So it's been really good.
No, I appreciate it. Thank you so much for having me, Brett. Yeah, it's been good to chat with you.
You too. Thanks, Jeff. Thanks for listening, everyone. And as always, if you like the podcast, please subscribe, review, and share. If you'd like to help with the production of these episodes, you can donate at theunderwaterpodcast.com. Any amount is welcome and really helps to keep the show going. If you'd like to connect with us or learn more about our guests, you can reach us at theunderwaterpodcast.com or on Instagram. We also have a Facebook group where you can discuss the episodes and even get your questions answered by our guests. There's a link to it in the show notes. You can learn more about my underwater photography workshops and mentoring at brettstanley.com or Brett S Photo on Instagram. The Underwater Podcast is presented and produced by me, Brett Stanley, and our music is Neo by Oh Boy. Keep creating, everyone. I'll see you in the water.